So it's 2 o'clock on the dot, and we're gonna get started. I'm sure folks will continue trickling in, so that to avoid any confusion here, this iPad has some speaking notes. I'm not just reading the newspaper or anything. So I'm Rob Biederman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Catalant Technologies based in Boston. And I think the ASU GSV people have helped us assemble an unbelievable panel today to talk about a topic that's definitely near and dear to our heart at Catalant. And probably having been on 50 panels before, the speaker prep call for this one I think was the most interesting I've been on. And actually we went over. Ordinarily those things end 10 minutes early and everybody wants to get off, and it's usually not a very good experience. This one went over and there were plenty of extra thoughts, so I think today is going to be really fantastic. What I think would be a great way to start is just to have each of you who represents and in some cases, 3 out of 4 cases, founded a very disruptive, innovative company, maybe talk about, to start, your company, but in the context of trying to move quickly and manage through hypergrowth. How have you thought about having the right organizational structure, and how does your company help other people potentially do that? So maybe an introduction, a little bit about what your company does, and then how you think about managing across hypergrowth and speed. Jules?
Yeah, I'm Jules. I lead monetization at Slack. We're a tool that connects people, data, but also other tools that you would use. And we do that so that you can work more efficiently and more collaboratively. And speaking of agility, one of the ways we enable that is we make information really easy to access by anyone at your company. So traditionally, if you're, let's say, a salesperson and you care about a particular product and you want to understand the timeline for go-to-market, you would hope that you're in an email thread and that people will keep you up to date, but that's rarely the case. In Slack, you can just find the channel where the product team is discussing that project, and then you can join it or follow along, and then you know what's going on. So people are empowered to go find the information instead of waiting for someone else to push it down to them. And that enables teams to move very quickly. So as it relates to our company, we obviously are big users of our own product, and the way we make sure people are moving fast is we break down into various teams that are quite autonomous, and then we just, as a company, make sure that we provide a lot of context for those teams so that they are aligned through various processes and various rituals. And we use our product to just share information and move really quickly.
So part of my customer promise, or I guess supplier in this case, promise to the ASU GSV folks, there would be targeted pushback and call out. So we'll come back on some of those things. Do you want to go next, Wayne?
Sure. I'm Crosby. I'm the co-founder of humu. Humu's the second startup that I founded. The first one was also in the disrupting the enterprise space, created an online collaborative presentation tool, ended up getting acquired by Google, ending up turning into the G Suite that so many of you guys use as well. And with Humu, we wanted to be a little bit more mission-driven and put people first. And so what we do is use behavioral economics in order to really help people find happiness in their work. And that's important because that drives business outcomes of productivity and retention. So it's along those lines, and we use a lot of science and behavioral learning mixed with computer science and product development in order to create those experiences. We do a couple of different things from our organization. We are still in this very rapid growth, as many people are. We're 50 people now, and we still do daily stand-up with all 50 people. Which sounds kind of crazy, but it's 11:45, we start stand-up, we are done 11:55, 12 o'clock, and people then use that as a natural place to come together and connect with people that they don't necessarily work with, have lunch, share, and really create that human experience that we all are looking for in belonging in work. So it's one of those things that I think if you build the muscle for, you can actually get the right information out in a big group very, very quickly. And part of the rules are you have to say it's okay to pass, right? And you can get around and get all the information out. But I think these small things that you do throughout the day and the actions that we take are actually going to be far more important as we look at the next decade of work, as opposed to any particular technology or disruption that you add into the specific work environment. Great.
Can I ask a question? Is it okay to ask questions?
It's okay to ask questions.
When do you think until when do you think you can continue to do so? 50 people stand up.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
So my goal was to basically make it till about 50 people with regards to this particular format. That's the other thing to recognize is what's right for your company in a particular stage becomes immediately wrong for your company in the next stage, right? And so I think my goal was to stretch this to 50. We made it there, and I checked in with everybody and said, hey, do we want to break these up? Do we want to do smaller groups? And it was a resounding, absolutely not. Let's keep this going until we actually break it. And so we've got other plans in terms of what happens when that actually breaks, but we haven't hit it yet, and I think we can easily get to 75, 100 in this current format.
Great. Omar?
Also, my name is Omar Tawakol. I'm the CEO of Voicea. Prior to starting Voicea, I grew a company called BlueKai that was acquired by Oracle, and it became the Oracle Data Cloud. And Voicea has a very simple mission. It's to turn talk into action. We built an enterprise voice assistant, Eva, that reads your calendar and joins your meetings and attempts to help you reconnect with the people in your meeting by saying, put down your computer, put down your notes, just focus on the people. And it captures it, helps you use kind of voice commands to, push things into workflow. If you don't want to use voice commands, it'll automatically tag aspects of your meetings so to help you kind of get to the gist of it. It helps you not go to meetings because if you really didn't need to be there, you'd get a very quick 2-minute summary. So it really just tries to help you reconnect with the people since those are the ones you're going to collaborate with to get stuff done. And that's really deeply in the core of the culture. One of the things that we do in terms of kind of being agile, which has nothing to do with our product, is we stick to a quarterly plan as opposed to a yearly plan in previous businesses I used to have. And we include everybody in the planning process. So it starts out, a month before, I'll basically put out my high-level summary of what I think the plan should be. The exec team then takes it to all their teams. They get bottoms-up feedback. They have a session where they just do nothing but read back to me what the company thinks we should be doing. And then we have an offsite, and then we go back and read out and say, this is what we're going to do. And we usually just have 3 things that we'll focus on so that it gives a contract to the company to come back to me and say, you asked for this thing, but it's not one of the top 3. Do you really want me to drop one of these? So focus is kind of like deeply embedded in the culture.
Great. Ahryun?
Ahryun Moon, CEO and co-founder of Goodtime. Goodtime is an interview logistics platform, so we efficiently schedule interviews for internal recruiting teams by matching the right interviewers to a given candidate based on their attributes. And we also schedule the training sessions for interviewers and provide very rich metrics and insights to talent leaders so they can continuously improve upon their interview process. In terms of agility, I think one thing that we do is definitely kind of going off of the same note on transparency and access to information. In terms of transparency, we look at 3 things. One is financial transparency, informational transparency, and decision-making transparency. So financial transparency, we share with every single employee what our ARR is, our monthly expenses, our burn rate, churn, everything in between. We try to share that with the entire company. Then informational transparency, for example, if I'm fundraising and I am meeting with specific VCs, I would actually share all the little details about what went on just so that our employees are in the know about what's going on and the decisions that are actually affecting them. And then decision-making transparency, actually, what we decided to do was in our bi-weekly all-hands meeting, because we actually had to break up the daily stand-up, we actually used to do that also, and right now we are about 34 people. We decided to transition into more of a bi-weekly session where each department shares major decisions that were made in the last 2 weeks, and then the major decisions that will be made in the next 2 weeks. And each department actually presents those. So those are some of the transparency-related things that we do.
Great. And so just before the next question, which sort of relates to how enterprises are thinking about disruption and agility, I always think in these settings, as somebody who's watched a lot of panels like this, it can be tempting to mentally write off some of the things that are upcoming in the next 30 minutes as, oh, it's the startup and it's a theory, it may not work. Big companies will probably never use this. So maybe if everybody could, and this probably is a little out of character, but just share your 1 or 2 sort of enterprise bona fide stats on this is not just a thought experiment or science project, but like actual real companies use this. I'll go first to make you feel safe. So Catalant works with about 30% of the Fortune 100 and 20% of the Fortune 1000, including very, very large global companies that have hundreds of thousands of employees.
Yeah, for Slack, at least 65 of the Fortune 100s are using us. And, big companies like IBM are using us for really important processes.
Great.
Yeah. Our target market for all of our customers is between 10,000 plus employees. Our system is designed to work with data and needs lots of data in order to support it, but we always work with companies all the way up to over 1 million employees.
Yeah, so we started about 2 years ago. We have, I'd say, 20 users in 20 of the top 30 Dow companies. I'd say about 6,000 different companies use us. We're kind of like Slack in a prosumer model, which is anybody can use us, and then it kind of grows virally with a viral coefficient of 0.72 and growing. So that's how we kind of spread.
We also started about 2 years ago, and we are fueling growth at 20% of unicorns and 40% of current decacorns, working with customers that are likes of Airbnb, Dropbox, Box, Expedia, and more.
Great. Okay, so credible, real people, real enterprise experience. Perfect. Maybe we'll go backwards starting with Ahryun, but I guess my question would be, as you look at your customer base and your own company, and you have, I presume in all of your customer bases, you have companies that are 100 years old and 125 years old. Some of those operate well, some don't operate well. You also have companies that are 4 years old. Some are scaling rapidly, some are not. What would you say is kind of the core cultural tenet or the operating principle that you think really facilitates agility? And in the case of the 100-year-old company, helps prevent disruption, or in the case of the 5-year-old company is actually leading or driving disruption?
I think in terms of business agility, I kind of look at it from kind of product development perspective. I kind of look at it in the process of actually listening and observing what customers are doing, and then making hypotheses and testing it. And in order for a team to be able to do that, I think what I call minimum viable team is necessary. And that's actually what I think a lot of, where the organization will actually evolve in the future. Is a lot of minimum viable teams that can actually make micro decisions together and communicating with each other on a daily basis, and actually making hypotheses and testing it and listening to customers, and then doing that cycle over and over again. And I feel like that's what Goodtime is trying to do also internally, and I've seen even some really large customers that are kind of doing that process.
So if you go back a long time ago and look at when Salesforce started re-educating the business on how to manage a pipeline, they didn't just provide a piece of software. They had a point of view on what a good pipeline process looked like. And we have a similar mentality at Voicea around meetings, which is to say people spend sometimes upwards of 50% of the time in meetings, and they go from meeting to meeting to meeting, forgetting what the actions and decisions were. And then a week later, they're kind of repeating some of the same stuff. So it's incredibly inefficient. If you look at our industry, it may be your largest indirect cost is labor time in meetings. So if we can move the needle on meeting hygiene by helping people look at each other more, connect more, and then always have a follow-up, an agreement, knowing what the agenda is, and being able to communicate to people who weren't in the meeting, we think we can move the needle on a lot of different cultures.
I would say that I would back this up just a little bit further and just say there's three main themes that kind of go into an amazing culture and being able to move quickly and be able to support people. That's the amount of meaning that you find in your work. And when I talk about meaning, that's like an emotional resonance with your customer. And it can be your end user, but it could also be an internal team for large organizations. If you have that, you actually see a huge productivity gain in your team. The amount of trust amongst your teams. And it's not only do you feel like you can trust your peers and your leadership to make the right decision, but there's this concept of psychological safety. Can you bring your whole self to work? And I think this is going to be another aspect that as you look at how work transforms over the next decade, as a lot of these jobs and routine tasks get automated away. It's going to be this, well, what am I doing then, and how can I bring my whole self to work? And so this element of trust and being able to be a person at work, I think, is going to be super critical. And I think that's something that is adopted. It feels you feel very acutely in a startup, and you'll feel more and more in large enterprise. And then the last piece is the empowerment piece, right? Of in a startup, you have all this autonomy to be able to just build and do whatever you want. And as large organizations kind of look at how they transform, they're looking to more agility approaches and agile, and trying to figure out how do we give more autonomy back to our individual employees. And so I think all three of those themes are going to be super important as we kind of look forward to preventing disruption in large organizations, as well as disrupting large organizations that don't adopt those.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Wayne's point around those three elements being really important. I think one of the things we're seeing is that more and more teams are becoming more distributed, and that becomes even a bigger challenge. How do you have a distributed team that feels connected, that also feels psychologically safe, empowered, and so on? And that's where, I think having the right tools, having the right culture, is really, really important.
So I think, summarizing briefly, communication, trust, vision, effectively keeping everybody on the same page, all critical. To date, we've now talked for 16 minutes, and we haven't explicitly really talked about the talent equation. We've talked about employees, and we've talked about human beings being humans at work. Maybe in a few sentences, if you feel like you're positioned in this way, which I think really all four of you are, if you're selling into HR, which probably isn't always to whom you sell into, but probably is somebody who gets involved at some point, what is your value prop on, or your 3-sentence explanation of why it is that by partnering with your company, X will occur on the talent side? Grab bag order. Anybody first?
For humu, it's really straightforward. If you want the business outcomes of productivity and retention, the intermediary there is a happy employee. And so the entire focus of our organization is to create happy employees that we can then run A/B experiments to prove that the things that we're doing and the stimulus that we're providing the environment are helping create happier employees that then lead to productivity and retention.
For us, productivity and efficiency that we can give back to our recruiting team, the customers that they use us. We thought that was the most prominent ROI that we can bring to our customers, which is definitely true. A lot of our users who are actually recruiting coordinators and recruiters, they end up spending a lot less time on scheduling and really be able to spend more time with candidates and end up doing a lot of more strategic work. But beyond that, what Goodtime can do is really kind of cut out the fat in the hiring process. So instead of doing the whole back and forth with your candidates via email, which actually adds a day or two to your every stage of your hiring process, we basically cut that out for you and get your candidates in the door faster. So one of our customers, Patreon, their time to hire actually went from 76 days to 36 days. So they see a really huge, meaningful reduction in time to hire. And also, candidates really love the efficiency part of the product, where they don't have to do the entire email back and forth over multiple days with recruiters. Instead of that, they can use Goodtime, pick a date and time, and actually come in and meet the interviewers.
Yeah, so for us, it's two things. One is making your working life more productive. We connect to all your tools and so on. And you can just get together as teams and then solve problems really quickly. And the second thing is we make your talent have a more enjoyable work life. And that's something that people value as well. Whether it's not having to do repetitive tasks like switching to various tools, but also just connecting with people across geographies, functions, and throughout your company.
So what we see is for customers who use Voicea is you have different types of benefits for different types. So the busy exec, what they report is much higher follow-up rates. So they have a meeting and there's always a follow-up. The system's nudging them. It's already captured some of the follow-up. Sometimes they've already entered it into their workflow systems like Salesforce or Trello before they ever leave the meeting. So that just drives a lot more efficiency and productivity for them. For the other type of note taker that's kind of like a product manager, program manager, that they want to detailed curate notes, this saves them time getting to kind of an accurate measure that they can share with people. And then there's a third type, which is people who can attend less meetings because they were just going to go up there and have the laptop open in case their name got called. For them, you don't really even have to attend. You just get a summary of the meeting in your inbox and have just a lot more time.
Great. Okay, so what's going to follow is the purposely a little bit spicy skeptical sort of perspective on your business that you can tell us all why that's not right. So we'll start with Wayne. Tell us more about this concept of nudges and why it's not, how the system actually works. And then I think nobody on the stage is looking for another notification or another mandatory task given to us by some either human or non-human task manager. So why is it not that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So a lot of our composition of the team, just to back up 1 second, we've got 15 engineers, we've got 10 people scientists, right? Those 10 people scientists are behavioral economists, they are cognitive psych, IO psych, and so we put a lot of energy onto the research of how do people actually make decisions, because that's at the core of what we're all trying to do. And behavioral economics has really been a driving muse for us, right? We make decisions over and over and over again in the short term, that help us in the short term, that actually are counter to our long-term goals. And so if you can actually add a stimulus to the environment, so a nudge, just to define it for you, a stimulus you add to the environment that does not remove choice, that has a material impact on behavior. And you have to have all three of those, because if you don't have the stimulus, you're not going to get any change of behavior. You have to do something different. If you want different outcomes tomorrow, you got to do something different today. You can't remove choice, because then otherwise people feel manipulated and controlled, and you have to be able to measure it. And this is something that most organizations don't do today. They operate based off of gut, they make some decision, they roll it out to the entire company. Who knows if that was the change that actually had the influence? And so you have to be able to start running A/B experiments and actually be able to understand this stuff. So these things, like these nudges, are super powerful, they're super lightweight, and they're helping you make a decision. They're adding a stimulus to the environment that is going to help you make a decision that's aligned with your long-term goals. That gets to the kind of the creepiness factor of, like, is this actually something that's watching me? Is it not? We don't do that. We want to make sure that the things that you're actually driving towards are aligned with your overall goals. I agree, nobody wants another notification system. Nobody wants another destination site. We have tools all over the place. The tools of tomorrow in the enterprise need to come to the end user. We don't really have a lot of space for another destination site in our workflows. And so the nudges come to you, and we make sure that we do it in a way that is, on average, what we're seeing is people are getting a nudge about once every 2 weeks. We're watching the system, trying to detect these various situations that have a disproportionate impact on your success, right? And there's all of these different moments in time. Not every moment in time is equal. And so you got to find the right moment in time, give the right piece of information. You're going to make a slightly different decision. And if that's only happening once every couple of weeks, that is actually very helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one theme that I think spans probably all 5 of these companies is the idea of kind of intelligent automation. So when you started talking about nudges, my mind went to 2 nudges I get very often from my Apple Watch. One is stand up, another is try to finish your steps, and the last is breathe. And they always pop up at like the worst possible times. Like you're on a board call and it's like, now's a good time to breathe quietly for 90 seconds. Like, this is not a good time. Like, please don't ever bother me again. And those automatic sort of dumb notifications lead to resentment, I think, pretty quickly.
That's right.
It'll be interesting for the 2 of you on the end to hear more about that. But Slack, meanwhile, one of the most interesting parts of the prep call, I think, was largely around, are the companies on this stage helping people drive to a happier work-life integration? Upside, good hypothesis, probably in all of our investor decks, or potentially in the case of this one company, Slack, is the ability to receive a very UX delightful notification across all 14 of your devices, 168 hours a week, actually leading people to feel like they always have to be on. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so it's something we think a lot about. And, just to put the whole thing in context, part of what we do is giving you access to more information, right? So you can join any channel in your company, and that helps you do your work and make decisions quickly. But as you mentioned, there are cases where people might sort of go too far. In particular, if you're joining a bunch of channels and always trying to keep up with everything and trying to use the mental models of email through Slack, so zero inbox, it just doesn't work as well. But that's something that's not having access to more information is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that with new tools, you need to have new norms and new expectations. And we also provide people with tools to handle those notifications. So specifically, we give you complete control on notifications, and we have defaults. So if you basically if it's after work hours and somebody messages you, you don't get that notification, or...
How many people have used they've snoozed notification, send one anyway? Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so, but I love that you're bringing that up because it gets to my second point, which is beyond just providing our users with tools, there's also cultural norms that need to be set in place. And those are norms that we definitely encourage, whether it's, making sure that people, like encouraging people not to send, at mentioning others unless it's really urgent or unless they need a reply immediately. And, but what's very common with new technologies is that it amplifies existing culture. So it's not that without Slack, your manager wouldn't have emailed you at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. It's just that now you have a tool that's also connected to your phone. And if you don't have the right settings or you don't establish the right healthy boundaries, then it might actually change the impact that it was having. So that's why we really now spend a lot of time with customers, helping them figure out what's the right setting or boundaries and norms for their particular organization. And it's something that we continue to work on.
And one thing that it seems to me that Slack does that email obviously doesn't do is if you've become dormant in a group or groups become dormant, it basically recommends you to leave.
Correct.
So we started a bunch. We first got Slack. We were all excited. We're going to have one for people from New York and one for people who like baseball. And then kind of Slack after 6 months was like, you actually don't really need these guys.
Yeah, and as you said, these are features that we think are important because what we want is not to overwhelm you with information, but to empower you to find whatever information is useful to you.
Okay, Voicea, dystopian, skeptical view. System won't be able to understand discomfort at next step, so oftentimes in our meetings at least, everybody agrees on a next step, but half the people look like they have stomach acid. Potentially people will feel uncomfortable voicing their true opinion or things that are controversial, things that they don't want preserved in the official written record. We don't need Big Brother listening to every single meeting. How do you respond?
Yeah, the second problem is more of a problem that we see. The first one, if somebody says for Eva to capture an action item, it's not really Eva's job to say, I'm not capturing that, you look like you have a bad stomach.
Yep.
But the second one is a real issue, which is what's the right social norm around recording meetings? So we've been growing very fast, so obviously there's something working on people doing it more. But some of the things we did are just very odd to try to get comfort. I'll give you an example. Today, if you go into a conference call and you press record, the owner of the meeting in the conference system is the one who owns the recording. When Eva joins the meeting, when Eva creates a recording, anybody who's on the calendar can come and delete for everybody. The idea, it's a very odd product pattern, but the reason we did that is that because every participant is now being recorded, we feel it's their data and it's a shared asset, and if you really have discomfort, you should be able to record. Obviously, if we can go in and record just what you said, we would, but that would be statistically tricky. So instead, we give anybody the right to delete for everybody. So that's number one. Number two is we have what I'd say is like kind of notification that's over the top. So if Eva reads the email, it'll tell everybody I'm going to be there. Once it shows up, it announces. Once it shows up and there's a video conference, it actually projects a video animated, Eva thing onto the screen, so everybody sees it there. And whenever it's taking a note, you see some sort of motion. And then after the meeting, there's email that will allow you to actually go in and delete. And then we just rolled out this mode recently called Vegas mode. So we'll walk into a meeting, and all of a sudden it turns really confidential, and you just really don't want a record. So you could just say, okay, Eva, switch to Vegas mode. And what happens is, as the meeting ends, the recording, the video, the transcript all deletes, and the only thing that remains is action items and next steps.
You can imagine almost a latter-day Watergate situation where the congressional testimony is about what happened while you were in Vegas mode.
Luckily, we delete it from our systems too, so there's. And we built that because there were some really large companies who said, "Hey, for some of our execs, I don't know, this could get us in trouble." And so we give them the workspace settings. They could actually force the company to be by default on Vegas mode unless you switch it back to, no, I want a long-term record here that's searchable and connected to my workflow.
So Ahryun, this will be the last sort of provocative skeptic question, and I think it actually ties the others together in a good way. So I am the person who coordinates interviews at a legacy company. I've been doing this for 35 years. I don't need your help. I don't need some system telling me how that's going to work. You don't understand. My candidates have a 75% placement rate versus your stupid algorithm. How do you convert that person or their boss?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, and also I think there are some, pretty common skepticism that we run into is, hey, I want to be closer to my candidates. I want to give white glove services. I want to kind of give the human touch to the candidates. That's pretty common skepticism that we run into. We actually recently did a survey to put a white paper together. And one of the things that we asked was, we surveyed 1,500 candidates what they think about interview scheduling. So we asked them, hey, would you like your recruiter to do an email back and forth and use the traditional method of interview scheduling, or would you actually like to have that power in your hand and you get to see the real-time availability of your interviewers and pick the date and time that works for you? The results were really interesting. So 75% said they would rather have the power in their hand than actually do the scheduling themselves. But if you actually narrow down that audience to students and people who are looking for internship, that number skyrockets to 98%. So the younger generation, much more so, want to have that automation of scheduling, and where they really want to have human touch is once they get into the hiring funnel and actually in the room with the interviewers, they want to get to know the interviewers better. They want their recruiters to know them as a person, and they want to get to know make sure the recruiters actually know you as a person. So I think it's more about where you kind of put importance on in terms of where the human touch needs to come in and what automation can actually do. So automation I really do believe that automation can make the process even more human. And that's what we actually have seen with our customers.
Yeah, we've seen something pretty interesting, and there are going to be two kind of concluding thoughts here before questions. Both are almost sort of like 99th percentile annoying tech industry conference panel comments, so forgive me in advance. One incorporates a little behavioral economics, but I think we've seen almost exactly the same thing on our platform, which is people rebel violently against the idea of our system telling them who to use for a given project in concept. Then, when you actually make a recommendation to them, 96% of the time, they pick the person that the system would have told them to pick. But if you shove it down their throat and say, this is the person you have to use, don't like absence of choice, they hate it and they rebel. If you give them two candidates presented in totally reasonable context, 96% of the time they will take the person that the system says is better, even if presented side to side. And so it's fascinating the way that the human mind works with respect to, doesn't want things force-fed to them, wants the illusion of choice, but doesn't mind knowing that there's some algorithms in the background helping. The other thing that I think you alluded to there is kind of a generational change, and it's unbelievable. We made it 33 minutes without anybody using the M word that I heard. But one thing that's fascinating about our workforce, we have about 175 full-time employees and then 72,000 people in the marketplace. Of the full-time employees, say 165 are millennials of some sort. And whether it's Slack or email, or I don't think we've ever done a written notification, I'd say sort of like the rate at which they absorb that is X, and the rate at which they absorb work things that are on my personal Instagram is like 5X.
Wow.
So if I run into an employee in the hallway, like, oh yeah, you spoke on that panel last week, that was great. It's like, oh, did you read the thing about our fundraiser? Like, no, where was that? And so there's definitely a aspect of, as the workforce composition changes tremendously, there's going to be completely new comfort with certain consumption models. And for people who are native to Alexa, soon we're going to have workforces where people grew up with Siri and Alexa and all that. To me, Voicea is not that weird at all, but to somebody who has taken written notes in meetings for 40 years, that's weird. So we have a handful of minutes left. I have an entire iPad full of questions, but I'd love to take some from the audience because it's a great group of people to take shots at. So anybody, there's the microphone in the center, you can just yell out loud.
You guys talked about how you acquired the first few customers and the first 3 customers, let's strategies for moving that enterprise software CEO trying to solve some
I can take a stab at it. So our first customer was Airbnb. It was a lot of hustle. This is gonna go on
I believe it is being recorded, yes.
Okay.
And the discomfort sets in.
Can we?
Vegas mode. Vegas mode.
Yeah.
Come to the conference, you'll hear the good stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of hustling. It took some months. It took a few months. We did very crazy things. One of the things that we did was we would actually pick up some cookies from like the most popular, the new hip trendy bakery in town, and we would call someone at Airbnb that was our point of contact there and say, hey, I happen to be near Airbnb office. Can we just drop off these cookies with your team? Like we did some very, very crazy things like that we don't do anymore. Maybe we should continue to do so. But we did a lot of different things to kind of hustle. I don't think there's any shortcut to it, but yeah.
I think in tech unicorn land, the cookie drop off is probably like 3 sigmas on the okay non-Vegas mode. Anybody else?
I'm just saying I'll be near your office soon if you have any extra cookies. We did this, what we call prosumer model. Actually, I should just shut up because we just essentially learned from Slack and Zoom and companies like that. Our prosumer model basically has a free product and a free trial, and a vast majority of business just comes to the website, app downloads, and once we see a company with like spiking growth and people just using it, the sales team engages and tries to upsell them to kind of enterprise solutions. What that forces is entirely not B2B thinking, it's a little bit more B2C thinking, which is you're continually hyper-focused on the engagement, on why are they using it, is it getting better and better. So if you look at 3 of the metrics for our quarter, 2 of them are just engagement metrics. And it's like real engagement, how do we make sure they're getting happier and every quarter using more and more, as opposed to relying on a top-down sale, which is a perfectly fine way of doing business. But I kind of like this prosumer model that just forces you to build better, and stickier products.
Yeah. You got to play to your strengths, whatever you have, right? In the early days, as a second-time entrepreneur and an amazing co-founder, who was when we started this company, basically, I have a press article that's hilarious. It says the LeBron James of HR starts company, and he hates basketball, which is kind of awesome. So I think we had a lot of inbound just from kind of press and brand and recognition in the industry of being able to with G Suite and with his brand as well. So you play to what your strengths are, and if you have those connections out there, you tell your friends, what are you working on? Who do I, within a couple of hops, you're going to get to somebody who is a decision maker that can help make the thing happen. And then it's just continually working with them to make sure that you're solving a real problem. The other thing I would say is make sure that whatever problem you're solving has a line item on the enterprise budget. It becomes really easy to be able to sell a vision and like talk about what the future holds and how you're going to transform the work environment, and everybody buys in. And then when it comes to actually going through procurement, it's like, where's this budget going to come from, right? And so it's oftentimes easier to say, like, I'm going to, even if it's not exactly your company's vision, this is the line item I'm going to target, this is the budget I'm going after, here's how I'm going to sell into that, but with the potential of being able to upsell into the other spaces that you're looking at.
Our opening narrative was nowhere near as elegant as the LeBron James of HR. We basically were business school students who went door to door to small businesses in Cambridge and tried very hard to get them to post like one $50 project to the platform. Got about 300 no's before our first yes. It was also February in Boston, which is not a good mix for outdoor door-to-door sales. But I think the key part of that process, and why, as ridiculous as it seems now when we're working with the C-suite of Fortune 100 companies, it gave the founders of the company, me and my partners who were actually doing the door-to-door selling, a unbelievably rapid positioning loop. And so we'd literally, at the end of the day, talk about every meeting we'd had. All of them had gone poorly. We analyzed why it was and then rolled out the new messaging for the next day. And had we hired, we didn't have the money, but if we'd had the money and we'd hired a sales force at that point, we probably would have had nowhere near as quick a refresh cycle on that. So I think the most important thing early on is it's probably no company's ever been founded that had an original concept be exactly what the market wanted to buy. And what has driven success for, I think, a lot of very successful companies is being able to very quickly pivot around whatever it is the customer actually wants versus the thing you thought that they wanted. So with that, I wanted to thank these fantastic panelists. I'm sure a bunch of them can hang around after to answer questions, and thank you for joining and for your attention.